Gospel of John study. We'll pick up the study here, right here in chapter 13. And last week we saw in verse 1 that Jesus knew his hour had come. You know, Jesus, we're told right here in the first verse that he knew that his hour has come. And in previous studies, and last week's study, and in previous chapters, we noted that his hour had not yet come. You know, Jesus had kind of just scurried away. The Lord had, the Father God had protected him from people trying to lay hold of him, people trying to do him harm. But his hour had not yet come. But now, here in chapter 13, we see that Jesus knew his hour had come. Jesus was on, we concluded that Jesus was on a divine timetable, men and women, orchestrated by God the Father, who had charted all things out. You know, the course of Jesus' life, his timetable, everything was worked out, everything was laid before the Lord, and God's plans and purposes would not be thwarted. In other words, the guys could not get a hold of Jesus. They couldn't harm him. They couldn't do him any bad things until, you know, all things had fallen into place and all things were coming down according to God's timetable and all to his glory. Jesus acknowledged in verse 3 that the Father had given him or entrusted to him all things, and all things were placed into his hands to see through fruition God's plans and purposes. And God had again foreordained all the works of Jesus. Jesus acknowledged, hey, I'm doing what my Father is doing. I'm obedient to what the Father has laid out for me. Jesus knew that his hour was upon him. He would be soon returning to God. And here we noted that this was the last week of Jesus' time on this earth. And, you know, he spent it with those things that were most important to him. And in this, after supper, he stripped off his outer garments, we're told, and he girded himself about with a towel and picked up a basin. In this, he began to wash the disciples' feet. And we pick up our study here in verses 6. We'll read verses 6 through 10. And he came to Simon Peter, and he said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered and said to him, What I do you do not realize now, but you shall understand hereafter. And Peter said to him, Never shall you wash my feet. And Jesus answered, If I do not wash you, you have no part with me. And Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus said to him, He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but he who is completely clean. And if you are clean, but not all of you, not all of you. Here we saw in our last study, guys, we called Peter impetuous, and, you know, rightly so at times. Peter was always spouting off. Peter was always doing things, and he was always seemed to be running ahead of the rest of the guys. And sometimes, you know, you kind of take the chance. You spout off. You're running ahead. You're doing this. You're doing that. And sometimes you're just kind of bumping into things and creating a havoc. And we described him as impulsive. And often he would give the knee-jerk reaction. One would open mouth and insert foot. More than once he had to be corrected by Jesus. And like ourselves, so often, guys, we need the Lord's correction and direction for our lives. A lot of times we're not walking in faith. A lot of times we're not trusting God. A lot of times God is leading and guiding and directing. And a lot of times we're questioning God. We said that, you know, oftentimes, like Peter, we say, hey, why God? Hey, not me, God. Or never will you bow down and serve me, Lord. But, you know, sometimes in simple humility, we allow to be spoiled and to be bathed and to be washed and to be nurtured by the Lord. And God was saying, you know, hey, I need to bring a little correction and a little direction. And like Peter, we question God's doings, and we try to tell him, Lord, there's a better way, or never you can do this. But yet we don't understand what the Lord is doing. And I got to confess, guys, that at times I just don't know what God is doing. And God has done a wonderful work here with us, guys. We started so many years ago sitting on the stairs, the front stairs at the school across the street, and a few guys just praying, and, you know, boom, the Lord opened the doors. We're in the school. Boom, we're opened the doors. The Lord opened up this place for us. Boom. You know, we've had the ability to be touched and to touch many, many others throughout the years that we've been here in downtown Honolulu. So often we don't understand what God is doing, and God wants to do a wonderful, marvelous work in us and through us. Jesus answered him in verse 7, you do not realize now, but you'll understand after. And so much of the time we just don't know what's going on in the here and now. But God is saying, hey, look in the future. Trust me that I'm moving beyond what you can think or what you can see or what you can understand right now. But he says, look forward. Important for us to remember at times, maybe most of the time, we just don't understand. But this doesn't give us carte blanche or the go-ahead to question God's working. And who is it that we would feel so bold or treat God so familiar that we would say, hey, how come God? Yeah, I'm not listening, God. I'm not going, God. But we just don't have the carte blanche or the go-ahead to question God's workings, His will, His plans and purposes for our lives. Why is this happening now, Lord? Why is everything was going so smooth and now everything is turned topsy-turvy? Oh man, we have this reversal at work. We have this thing going on with our health. We have this thing going on with our children, or my spouse has gone wild, or I've gone wild, whatever it might be. Is that a laughing accusation, laughing or whatever? But the things that says, we just don't understand and we question His plans and purposes. Peter, again, he's emphatic. Never shall you wash my feet, he's telling the Lord. And to which Jesus replies, if I do not wash you, you do not have any part of me. This really got Peter's attention. Again, Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but my hands and my head. And now that emphatic request, wash all of me, all over, not only my feet, but all over me, Lord, because I know I need you. So, forgive me, wash all of me. And Peter turned 180 degrees, saying to the Lord, I want all you have for me. Even in the difficult times, even as we question God's wisdom. And I hate to even verbalize that, but I gotta confess that in my heart sometimes you just wonder, oh God, why is this? What's going on? And you gotta, admit to God, hey, I'm sorry, Lord, but in my own human understanding, I'm asking you this. And there's a good time, but that's a good place to be at. But Jesus now goes further. Now he's gotten Peter's attention. And as much as we've spoken of Peter, his actions and his mistakes, if it wasn't that he didn't love the Lord or he wasn't willing to take a chance or step out in faith, Peter was a guy, he loved the Lord. He was willing at times to take a chance and stepping out in faith. And I'd like to read from Matthew for you, Matthew 14. Some of the exploits of Peter. And when you look at some of the other gospel passages, guys, Peter is mentioned quite a few times, but in Matthew 14, 22, and immediately he made the disciples get out of the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, and he sent the multitudes away. And after he had sent the multitudes away, he went up to the mountains by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat had already gone many stadia away from the land, battered by the waves, and the winds were contrary. And the fourth watch at night, he came to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking, they were frightened, saying, it's a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take courage. It is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come you on the water. And he said, come. And Peter got out of the boat, and he walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and afraid and began to sink. He cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately the Lord stretched out his hand and took a hold of him and said to him, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they had gotten into the boat, the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, you are certainly God's son. And here, we see Peter, we think of him as impulsive, impetuous, but yet he's the one that called up to the Lord. Lord, beckon to me. If you command me to come, I'll come to you. I'll walk on that water. And as he did, Peter got out. He walked on the water and came toward Jesus. And I don't know how this comes to pass, but he saw the wind. He became afraid. He saw the wind, or the activity of the wind, and he began to sink. And he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. I gotta give Peter credit for this, that he's the only one that says, hey, Lord, if you command me, I'll come out there to you. I'll come out with you. I'll come out on the water with you. And though he was afraid, though, his faith wavered, you got to give him credit that he just cried out to the Lord, and the Lord came and rescued him. And sometimes like little kids, guys, we're just like that. We might be bouncing on the bed, and our mother, our father, our grandmother, whoever it might be, they just take one last big jump, and they come out to you. They're flying through the air, and they say, "Grandma, catch me!" Something like that. Dad, catch me! And what we're gonna do? We're gonna grab them. We'll drop all the sandwiches or the pots and pans, and we're gonna come and grab them. And you gotta say that, hey, that's in faith, that you wanna say, hey, Lord, catch me, Lord, hold me. And we often think that Peter, there was a guy who came to church last week, and he said that he walked in after the service, was helping himself to some coffee and snacks, and I don't know how I got to speak with him, but I don't know how he got to Peter, but he said Peter is a blankety blank. And I went, whoa, who is this guy? He's in the house of the Lord, and he's, using this vernacular to describe Peter. I said, oh, too bad you weren't here for the service, because we talked quite a bit about Peter. And, we went on. He said, I just don't like his actions. I said, well, maybe the things you see in Peter, maybe you see in yourself. That's why you don't like it. And I kind of walked away. I said, sorry, I got to go pray with somebody else. But he didn't like Peter. I said, we love Peter. Peter was much like us. And the very things you dislike about Peter, maybe those are the things that you see in yourself. I don't know. But, Matthew 17:24, they had gone to Capernaum, and those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter. Does your teacher pay the 2 drachma tax? And he said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect customs or poll tax? From the sons or from strangers? And upon his saying from strangers, and Jesus said to him, consequently the sons are exempt. But lest we give them offense, go into the sea, throw in a hook, take the first fish that comes out, and when you open its mouth, you'll find a stater, take that and give it to them for you and me. Peter was one who was on the forefront of the ministry. There were those, the tax collectors, they came knowing that Peter was one of Jesus' men, and they said, hey, do you pay this tax? And Peter said it rightly. He says, hey, don't worry about it. Yeah, we do pay the tax. And he came into the house. Jesus already knew what was going down. And Jesus says, hey, what do you think, Simon? Peter didn't even have to say anything. The Lord already knew what had gone down. And yet he uses this as a teachable moment. He's saying, hey, do these guys collect from their sons, or do they collect from the regular people? And Jesus wanted to just get this point away that we're sons of the God Most High. We're exempt from this tax, but yet before we stumble these earthly beings, they go down to the beach, throw your fishing line in, catch that fish, take the coin out of his mouth, and go pay the tax for you and I, that we won't stumble these guys, these publicans. And yet, he was in there with the Lord, a very teachable moment. He was a representative of Jesus, while Jesus walked this earth. Chapter 18 in Matthew, verses 21 and 22. Peter came and said to him, speaking to Jesus, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And then Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. And Peter asked these hard questions of the Lord. Peter asked the questions about a brother offending brother. And the big question is, hey, what about forgiveness? What about forgiveness? And Jesus goes into a discourse about the kingdom of heaven, a certain king settling account with his slaves. And as the bottom line, he's telling Peter, as much as you have been forgiven, forgive your brother. And that's the hardest thing to do, because sometimes there was one writer who says, love is surrendering my right to hurt or to kind of lash out in anger against that one who has sinned against me or has hurt me. It's a thing that says, hey, I give up my right to feel like I'm in the right to kind of exalt my pound of flesh or get my pound of flesh out of the situation, and to ask this guy and not to forgive him, let him squirm under my thumb. But Peter was right there. He was asking those hard questions, and the Lord was giving him all the right answers. And maybe Peter was one like the sons of thunder. Amen. Should we call fire and thunder and lightning bolts to come consume these guys, Lord, or what? But here again, Peter, as often as he was, we think of him as impetuous and so on and so forth. Peter was right there on the firing line, and Peter was curious. He was hungry. Lord, what about this? What about that? Matthew 26, verse 30, after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said to him, you all will fall away because of me this night. And it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, the sheep of the flock will be scattered. And after I've said, and after I've been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. But Peter answered and said to him, even though all may fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Truly I say to you that this very night before a cock crows, you shall deny me 3 times. And Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same thing. Same things. We all know what happened. That that little slave girl confronting Peter, she said, hey, you're one of them. Oh, you're a Galilean, you must be one of them. No, I recognize your accent. You one of them. And no, I never knew the guy. And he denied Jesus, and that the rooster crowed 3 times. And Peter went away, he wept bitterly because he knew that, hey, all the things that he had told the Lord in the weakness of his flesh, he denied the Lord. Guys, at times, we fail the Lord miserably. And we think of Peter as impetuous. Peter, like the guy that came in last Sunday, he used that Peter was a blankety blank. And you can kind of think that, hey, maybe in human terms, Peter was kind of that blankety blank type of guy. But Peter was a guy much like us, guys. Peter was a person much like us. And oftentimes we question, oftentimes we are impulsive. Oftentimes we say the wrong thing, we do the wrong thing. Oftentimes we declare our loyalty and obedience, and yet at times, so often, we fail. Yet the Lord loved him. Yet the Lord loved him. The Lord says, hey, when you return, feed my sheep. When you come back, feed my sheep. Because he knew that the Lord wanted to do a work of restoration. And sometimes when we fail so badly, guys, God wants to not kick us out, not throw us out. He wants to do that work of restoration. And he wants to take that life and use that life for his glory, that we might know his faithfulness, that we might know his love. Right here in 26:36, Jesus came to them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and distressed. And he said to them, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. And he went away a little way beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. He said to Peter, he didn't mention John and James by name here in Matthew, but Peter's mentioned twice. So you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour. Keep watching and praying, because you too may not enter into temptation. the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, it's a teachable moment for Peter. He says, hey, come, keep watch with me, pray with me, tarry with me, lift my arms up in prayer, in support as I pray this time before my time comes. My soul is deeply grieved. And he found them sleeping. And isn't it that like us sometimes? I tell the guys on Saturday morning, oh yeah, sometimes I I'm praying on my bed, and prayer and meditation turns into meditation. At least sometimes I wake up, I find the Bible, I'm holding the Bible to my chest, which is good. But, I think I would have been up if I was sitting on that straight back chair with the hard seat, and, I might have been awake a little bit more, But he says, keep watching and keep praying. But I want to, just say, hey, Peter in all his failings and all the things of the weakness of the flesh, he said in chapter 16, Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi and began asking the disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And some says John the Baptist, and others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him and said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal to you this, but because my Father who is in heaven. Peter, in all of his little sayings and all of his little slip-ups and trip-ups and fumbles, he acknowledged that Jesus was the Son of God, the Son of the living God. And in that the Lord was so blessed because Peter had known that truth. And there's much more about Peter in the Gospel of John. We're told that Peter, when the temple guard came to take Jesus out of the garden, Peter pulled out his sword and he cut off the ear of Malchus, the priest's servant. And you're going to think that Peter was probably trying to cut off his head. But he only got his ear. And Jesus quickly, I think he probably just reattached his ear. His ear was healed. But he says, hey, put that sword away, Peter. But you got to love Peter's heart. You got to love Peter's heart, that he was in it for the Lord. Church tradition tells us that Peter was a pretty old guy in Rome. And the word that the Roman government was going to lift his head off or, kill him, actually came to Peter. Peter was escaping out of Rome when he met Jesus walking into the city of Rome. And Jesus told him, I'm going back to be crucified again. And what Peter did was he turned around, he went back to Rome. He requested to be crucified upside down. And he was one of those, the martyrs, the church martyrs early on after the crucifixion of Jesus, after all these things came down, probably about 70 AD, Peter gave up his life. But Peter was a guy, we think of him as impetuous and so on. But we pick up our story back in John 13, verse 10. Sorry for that little sidebar. I just wanted to give you a little bit more light into his life, because we think too less of Peter when Peter was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. And those are only a few highlights of what took place, but you can do an exhaustive search through the Gospels. Verse 10 says, Jesus said to Peter, he who has bathed only needs to wash his feet, but he is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you. Here we see two words. In my Bible, we see the word bathe, and we also see the word wash. You might think to yourself, what's the big deal? What's the difference between the two? What's about bathing? What's about washing? But these are two separate Greek words, guys. The wash is the Greek word nipto, and it's used to describe only washing part of the body. It's kind of, it will be used for the washing of the hands or the washing of the feet. But the word here in my Bible in chapter 10, to bathe or bathe, is the word luo, is to bathe or to wash the body in entirety, the entire body. It's like saying that you're going into a bathtub, you're soaking in that bathtub, you're scrubbing up from head to toe. To be washed was really saying, hey, I'm washing my hands, I'm washing my feet. There are two different words, but the word here, bathe, and the word wash, two separate words. And Jesus said to him, he who is bathed is completely clean, and that he speaks of is as a sinner trusts Jesus to be Savior and Lord. As a sinner trusts Jesus to be Savior and Lord. He is bathed all over. He is washed. He is cleansed. He is forgiven of his sins, guys. All the sins past, all the sins present, all the sins future, he's bathed. In other words, he's set apart for God. He's received the salvation of the Lord. He is washed in entirety. The Lord declared in Jeremiah 31:34, for I will forgive their iniquity and their sin I will remember no more. Those are the sins that separated man from the love of God, guys. Those are the sins that says, hey, my heart is hard against God. There's no way. But after we say, hey, Lord, come into my heart. Lord, be my Lord, be my Savior. We are bathed by his love. We are bathed and we are washed and we are cleansed. But as we walk in this world, guys, it's the dust and dirt of this world that clings to our feet. I don't know where I was this week, but I was on one of the construction sites. I know where I was. I was on the rail transit project out in the Leeward area, and it was so dusty and dirty. I looked down at my boots, my work boots, and they were just absolutely covered with dust and dirt. And it's like the dust and dirt of this world. It clings to our feet, bringing uncleanness or defilement. What it speaks of is a spiritual defilement, a spiritual uncleanness as we walk through this world. This uncleanness or this defilement may be thought of being unclean or to be smeared with mud or filth. And sometimes when it rains out on the construction site, man, we gotta walk through the muck and through the mire. And ask Martha about that, you wouldn't know about that. But as we walk in this world, we step into messes, seen and unseen. We pick up on our feet the mud and filth, and we become defiled or unclean. It's kind of like the sin is jumping onto us. This sin is kind of dirtying us up. We're kind of thinking that, oh, I got angry, oh, I got mad, oh, I wanted to tell that guy off, oh, that guy cut me off, oh, the guy sat at the green light at the left turn lane until the light turned yellow. Then he woke up, then he sped through, and I was stuck there at the red. And I said, oh, I could have just... I said, why me, Lord? But yet in that anger, you kind of get mad, you kind of get, you kind of sin, and you say, hey, rocker, you rocket, you. And we walk in this world, we step into these messes, seen and unseen. And now, we don't need to be bathed again because we're already saved. We're already set apart for the Lord. But we do need the washing of our feet to keep ourselves clean, unstained by the things of the world. The world wants to jump onto us. The world wants to cling onto our feet. So the washing of the feet says, hey, we come daily to the Lord. Might be for some, it might be every hour. For others, it might be every minute. And it might be like the fan in your house or in your office. It's not a fan, it's a clock, but it's a centimeter. That thing is just spinning. And that centimeter is spinning because the person sitting in front of it, man, he might be a sinner. And it's spinning like a fan. And we need the mud and the filth to be washed off of ourselves. I'm not saying that we have an excuse to live in sin, guys. But I'm saying it's inevitable that in this world we will sin, we will get angry, we will say, hey Lord, how come? We question the Lord. Lord, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way, okay. But it brings a stain to the things. James encouraged the church to keep oneself unstained by the world. That's in James chapter 1:27. Jesus wrote, John would wrote in his first letter, the first epistle of John, do not love the world nor the things of the world. The world is always mentioned as a bad thing, guys. It has a bad connotation. Paul wrote to Timothy, make effort to come to me soon, For Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me. And he was in the bars, he was in the nightclubs, he was, in the strip clubs, whatever it was. Demas loved this present world. He's deserted me. So he's writing to Timothy, come to me, Timothy. I need some help. I need some companionship. I need my books. I need my cloak, because it's dark. It's damp in this prison here in Rome. This was the second letter of Timothy. That was the last letter that Paul wrote. And upon his heart was this heartbreaking thing that his friend Demas, his ministry partner Demas, had walked away from the Lord, having loved this present world and deserted Paul. The pollution of the world, which is unconfessed sin, detracts from our walk in the Lord, guys. In fact, on our Wednesday night study, this coming Wednesday night, Isaiah 59 study, we'll see how this can cause a breach in our relationship with the Lord, that unconfessed sin, or that sin against the Lord, detracting from our walk in the Lord, guys. But as in, there's no mistaking, as we are bathed in God's walk of salvation in Christ, this begins a settled relationship with Him. It's settled. Hey, my son is saved, my daughter is saved. They have salvation. But the washing, like the washing of the priests of old, it speaks of a washing away of the defilement of the world, of living in the world, or walking in the world. In the Old Testament priesthood, guys, when the priests were consecrated, when they were set apart to minister for the Lord, they went into the bath. They took this bath, this washing, this cleansing, this soaking in a tub called a bath. But before they would come to the Lord and minister to the Lord, they would always wash their hands. They would always wash their feet, that they would be cleaned of any defilement of the world. And it's really symbolic of sin and how that sin defiles us. Jesus concludes in verse 10 with this statement, but not all of you are clean. And Jesus was referring to Judas, unfortunately. Verse 11 says, for he knew there would be one who would be betraying him. For this reason, he said, not all of you are clean. And this takes us back to John 6:64. For Jesus knew from the beginning who did not believe and who it was that would betray him. Jesus knew from way back early on in the ministry that there were those that didn't really believe him, and there were those that would betray him. And this brings us to the question again, did Jesus love Judas? Yes, he did. Jesus loved Judas. Even as he loved you and I, he loved us as we were, guys, before we came to him. You know that song that Crystal Lewis used to sing at the Greg Laurie Harvest Crusades? Come just as you are. Let the Spirit move. Come to me. Come and see. I will be with you forever was the promise of God to the sinner. And the greatest thing we can do is come just as we are. Because you have friends and family members. You've invited them to church. And the first thing they say is, hey, let me clean up my act first, right? They tell you, let me clean up my act. And it's not that we got to clean up our act. It's that we come just as we are. And Jesus accepts us just as we are. He loved us with all of our sins, all of our shortcomings, all of the ugliness that was upon us. I have much more for this study, but I think we're going to call it right here. We'll continue next week, guys. And I think that's a great place to be at, that Jesus loves us just as we are.